You wake up in your home one morning in your quiet vacation town. It's not tourist season yet, and it's the big day. The dirt roads are getting sprayed down so that the dust that gets kicked up isn't a nuisance anymore. You make your coffee, go about your day, oblivious to the man who is currently spraying down your dirt roads with a dangerous, extremely toxic chemical. Years later, the town is flooded and it leads to a full evacuation, with government agencies telling you that you are no longer allowed to return to your home. And you can't take anything with you. Times Beach, your home as you know it, is now too toxic for you to stay there. So what happened? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Jax, and this is Morbidly Macabre, the show where I talk about morbid history, true crime, cryptids, and other spooky topics that might catch my interest. What has been catching my interest lately are environmental disaster events in America that leads to ghost towns that were abandoned due to the disaster that rendered that entire town unlivable. Today we're talking about Times Beach, a small vacation town in Missouri that was abruptly abandoned. If you liked today's video, please consider hitting that like button, and if you find yourself coming back to my channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button as I do post a new video every Friday. I stream over on Twitch 5 to 6 days a week at Jax Murray Gaming. Alright, let's get right back into the video. Take a moment to look at this picture. The gray portion of the photo is Times Beach in 1990. The homes are abandoned and the town is about to be excavated and basically razed to the ground. The green portion is 19 years later in 2009, with trees growing over the streets and reclaiming the land. Times Beach is one of the worst environmental disasters in United States history. But let's talk about what it used to be before the disaster. In 1925, Times Beach was founded to be a summer resort before Route 66 received its federal highway designation. The St. Louis Star-Times newspaper purchased a plot of land between the Merrimack River and the Frisco Railroad tracks. And in an effort to increase their newspaper sales, they sold property in about 20 by 100 foot lots for $67.50 each. If you purchase a lot, it comes with a newspaper subscription or vice versa. It was intended to be a summer home for St. Louis residents, and it developed into a weekend and summer recreational area over the course of a decade. When the Great Depression hit the town, it became more of a permanent residence for the people who stayed there. And with the addition of the Bridgehead Inn in 1935, which was later bought and renamed to Steiny's Inn in 1947, and a housing shortage in St. Louis, the town grew rapidly. At its peak, it had a population of about 2,000 people. Now let's talk about what happened to lead this town to be completely abandoned and demolished with warning signs posted around it. In the 1970s, the town was looking for a way to deal with dirt roads that kicked up dust around the town. The town turned to Russell Bliss, a waste hauler, and had him oil down the roads to sort of glue the dust down. However, what they didn't know was that the waste oil that Russell was using was waste oil that was acquired through someone else. The oil he was using was being disposed of by the Northeastern Pharmaceuticals and Chemical Company. Now, the name Northeastern Pharmaceuticals and Chemical Company might not be familiar to most people, but if you have knowledge of the Vietnam War, you at least know one of their products. They produced Agent Orange. Agent Orange is a strong pesticide that was used during the Vietnam War, and it also contained a chemical called tetrachlorodibenzo P-dioxin. Dioxin is a highly toxic chemical compound that lasts for years in the environment. It gets into the waters, it gets into the soil, and it gets into the food chain. It's a carcinogen, and it causes darkening of the skin, liver issues, chloracne, type 2 diabetes, immune system dysfunction, nerve disorders, muscular dysfunction, hormone disruption, and heart disease. Agent Orange is a whole topic in itself. I will do a video on it later because there is so much information that needs to be discussed. So Russell Bliss was spraying down the dirt roads of this town with waste oil that contained dioxin. He had been using this oil previously on other dirt roads and on horse tracks. He tested the spray at one of these sites in 1971, the Shenandoah stables, and over 40 horses died, and dead birds, dogs, and cats were also found around the tracks in the arena. When the owner's daughter became ill as well, the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control, were contacted. Russell Bliss didn't begin spraying the town's dirt road till 1972, and he didn't finish until 1976. At this time, the CDC was investigating the dioxin exposure, and a fund was created by the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, which is also known as the Superfund. From the EPA's website, this law created a tax on the chemical and petroleum industries and provided broad federal authority to respond directly to releases or threatened releases of hazardous materials that may endanger public health or environment. In March of 1982, the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, received documents from the CDC that discussed the dioxin contamination, so they began sampling sites across the state of Missouri. In November, they began testing Times Beach. Now, if it was just the dirt roads that were sprayed, it would be one thing. But unfortunately, in December of 1982, right after completing the soil test, the town had received record flooding from the Merrimack River. Residents were evacuated due to the flooding, and when the water had receded, the soil analysis was made public. At this time, the dioxin had been flushed over the entire town and everywhere in and around homes. The public was advised by the EPA to stay out of the town, and if they had actually returned to the town, they were told that they needed to leave immediately and they couldn't take anything with them, because everything had been exposed to the dioxin. The EPA did announce a buyout at the beginning of February 1983 due to the contamination being 300 times the safe levels of dioxin exposure. The town was recognized as a Superfund site, and the residents were permanently relocated, and this was the first federal buyout of a town in the United States history. As previously discussed in another video, Centralia was also bought out, but that was in 1984. This event was considered a turning point in the EPA that helped with the passage of the Superfund law. After the passage of this law, over 400 other environmental hazard sites have been restored to safe and healthy sites for homes, businesses, and parks. So what happened to Russell Bliss, the man who was spraying down the roads with the dioxin? Nothing. He was questioned and said he had no idea he was using dioxin in the spray. No laws or regulations were in effect at this time either for disposal of hazardous waste. However, there were thousands of lawsuits against him and the chemical company and other subcontractors. In 1996 and 1997, 265,000 tons of contaminated soil and debris were incinerated, and the town site was turned back over to Missouri. It is now considered safe by the EPA, and it is actually a state park now called the Route 66 State Park. Steiny's Inn, also known as the Bridgehead Inn, is also now a visitor center, and it is a museum to Times Beach with the history and Route 66. Times Beach is now once again being enjoyed by the general public. Well, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember, if you enjoyed today's video, please consider hitting that like button. And if you want to see more from me, please hit that subscribe button. I do stream over on Twitch 5 to 6 days a week at Jax Marie Gaming. And I thank you so much for your time today as you joined me. Thank you once again. And as always, stay curious. Goodbye.